Inside the Arctic expedition, where everything went wrong, the ship groaned, a low, terrible sound, like the earth itself was being torn apart beneath them. And in a way, it was. The ice had come in the night, silent and absolute, and now it was doing what Arctic ice does to ships built by men who thought they were ready for it. It was winning. It was 1914. The world was about to go to war. But on the frozen Weddell Sea, at the bottom of the world, 28 men had a more immediate problem. Their ship, the Endurance, was being crushed alive, and their nearest help was over 1,000 miles away. What happened next would become one of the most extraordinary survival stories in the history of human exploration. Not because everyone died, but because somehow, impossibly, no one did. Ernest Shackleton had been dreaming of Antarctica for years. He had already made 2 expeditions south. He had come within 97 miles of the South Pole before starvation forced him to turn back. He had earned his reputation the hard way, and in 1914, he had one final ambition: to cross the entire Antarctic continent on foot, from the Weddell Sea to the Ross Sea, nearly 1,800 miles through the most hostile terrain on Earth. He advertised for crew in London. According to historian Caroline Alexander, whose definitive account of the voyage draws on the crew's own diaries and photographs, the ad was brutally honest. It said, men wanted for hazardous journey, small wages, bitter cold, long months of complete darkness, constant danger, safe return doubtful, honor and recognition in case of success. 5,000 men applied. Shackleton chose 27. The Endurance left London in August 1914. The same week Germany declared war on France. Most people weren't paying attention. The newspapers were full of troop movements, not ship departures. But for the men aboard the Endurance, the world outside would soon become entirely irrelevant. They reached South Georgia Island, a remote British outpost in the South Atlantic, in late October. The whalers there gave Shackleton a warning. The ice that year, they said, was the worst in living memory. Pack ice moving north earlier than anyone had seen before. Shackleton listened. He delayed for a month. He waited, then he went anyway. The Weddell Sea in January 1915 was treacherous. The Endurance was a purpose-built polar vessel, reinforced oak hull over 2 feet thick in places, shaped like an egg so that ice would squeeze it upward rather than crush it inward. She was one of the strongest wooden ships ever built. The ice did not care. By mid-January, the pack ice had closed around the ship completely. She was locked in. The men dropped anchors into the ice, lowered their sled dogs onto the frozen surface, and waited for the ice to loosen. It never did. For 9 months, the Endurance drifted north, carried by the slow rotation of the pack ice, going nowhere anyone wanted to go. The men hunted seals and penguins for food. They played cards. They staged theater productions on the ice. Frank Hurley, the expedition's official photographer, documented everything with a camera. Images that would later stun the world with their clarity and their horror. Historian Ranulph Fiennes, who has studied Shackleton's leadership intensively, notes that the extraordinary calm Shackleton maintained during those 9 months was itself a survival strategy. Panic, he understood, was contagious. Then in October 1915, the ice moved, not to release them, to destroy them. The pressure ridges, massive walls of ice thrown upward by the collision of ice sheets, began grinding against the hull. The oak beams cracked. Water began to pour in. The pumps ran constantly but could not keep up. The ship was dying beneath their feet. Shackleton gave the order to abandon ship. The men had 20 minutes. They loaded what they could onto the ice: 3 small lifeboats, food, tents, sleds, the sled dogs, and whatever personal supplies Shackleton permitted. He told each man they could carry 2 pounds of personal belongings, no more. To make his point, he dropped his own gold watch on the ice and walked away from it. On November 21, 1915, they watched the Endurance sink beneath the ice. She went down in the night, her bow rising at the end, her mast disappearing into the black water. Frank Hurley captured it on film. Shackleton wrote in his diary that night, "I cannot write about it." Now there were 28 men standing on a floating ice sheet in the Weddell Sea. The nearest land was over 300 miles away. Their lifeboats couldn't move until the ice broke up enough to sail. And winter was coming. They built a camp on the ice. They called it Patience Camp, and they waited. For 4 months, they drifted north on the ice sheet, slowly, toward open water. The sled dogs, beloved by the men, had to be shot. They could no longer afford to feed them. The ice camp was getting smaller. In April 1916, the ice broke up. The men launched their 3 small lifeboats into the freezing, storm-driven waters of the Southern Ocean. For 7 days, they sailed, barely sleeping, frost-bitten, soaked through, eating frozen seal meat to stay alive. The boats were open. The waves were enormous. At one point, a rogue wave nearly capsized the largest boat. The men bailed with their bare hands. They reached Elephant Island on April 15, 1916. It was the first time any of them had stood on solid ground in 497 days. Elephant Island was not a rescue, it was barely survival. The island was uninhabited, brutal, and far outside any shipping lane. No one would ever look for them there. Shackleton made a decision that oceanographer and explorer Tim Jarvis, who later retraced Shackleton's route, has called one of the greatest acts of leadership in exploration history. He would take the best lifeboat, the James Caird, with 5 men and sail to South Georgia Island, 800 miles away, across the most dangerous ocean on Earth. The James Caird was 22 feet long. They launched on April 24, 1916. Shackleton, navigator Frank Worsley, and 4 crew members crossed the Drake Passage in 17 days. Hurricane-force winds, seas 60 feet high, ice forming on the boat's rigging, threatening to capsize her with its weight. The men chipped ice off the deck continuously in the dark, in the cold, in the storm. Worsley navigated by sighting the sun with a sextant on the rare moments it appeared through the clouds. The margin for error was almost nothing. Missed South Georgia Island, and they sailed into open ocean and died. They did not miss it. On May 10, 1916, they made landfall on the southern coast of South Georgia Island, but the whaling station was on the other side, separated from them by the interior of the island, a jagged, unmapped mountain range that no one had ever crossed on foot. Shackleton, Worsley, and 1 other man, Tom Crean, set out on foot. They had no map of the interior because no map existed. They had a rope and a carpenter's adze. They walked for 36 hours without stopping. Twice they climbed ridges, only to find impassable cliffs on the other side, and had to descend the way they came. Once, caught on an ice ridge as night fell and the temperature dropped to fatal levels, Shackleton made a decision. They coiled their rope, sat together on it like a toboggan, and slid blindly down the mountain in the dark, not knowing what was at the bottom. At the bottom was flat snow. They had survived. They reached the Stromness whaling station on May 20th, 1916. The station manager, who had known Shackleton from previous expeditions, did not recognize the 3 men standing at his door. Gaunt, blackened by frostbite, their hair matted, their clothes in rags. When Shackleton told him who he was, the manager turned away. He was crying. The men left on Elephant Island waited for rescue. They had turned 2 lifeboats upside down and lived underneath them for 4 months. They ate limpets off rocks. They burned blubber for heat. 3 times Shackleton tried to reach them from South Georgia with rescue ships, and 3 times the ice turned him back. On his 4th attempt, on August 30th, 1916, the ship broke through. All 22 men were alive, every single one. In the century since, historians and psychologists have studied Shackleton's leadership exhaustively, trying to understand how he held 27 men together through 2 years of total catastrophe without losing a single one. The answer, most conclude, is that Shackleton understood something fundamental about human survival, that the body can endure far more than the mind, and that the mind can endure far more than it believes, if someone it trusts tells it not to give up. He watched his men. He noticed who was struggling before they knew they were struggling. He changed tent assignments to separate friction and build morale. He made sure the warmest sleeping bag went to the man most prone to cold, even if that man was not the most senior. He shared his food. He made decisions quickly, reversed them without ego when new information arrived, and never let the men see him afraid. What the Endurance expedition ultimately reveals is something older than exploration, older than the sea itself. It is the same thing that has carried human beings through every age of catastrophe and cold and impossible odds. Not courage in the dramatic sense, not the ability to feel no fear, but the quieter, stranger gift of choosing, over and over, not to stop. Shackleton and all 27 of his men returned to England. Most of them went immediately to the Western Front, to a war that would kill millions. Several died there. Shackleton himself went back to Antarctica in 1921 on one final expedition. He suffered a heart attack aboard his ship in the harbor of South Georgia Island, within sight of the mountains he had crossed on foot, and died there at the age of 47. He was buried on the island at the request of his wife. He is there still.